Welcome to It's Our Time with Scott Ryan. Today we're going to have some time with writer Barry Gifford, who wrote Wild at Heart, Lost Highway, and Hotel Room with David Lynch. Wild at Heart based on his book, and Lost Highway and Hotel Room were original screenplays. Barry Gifford doesn't give a lot of interviews, and he doesn't talk a lot about his work with David Lynch, so this is a real treat. Unfortunately, I got this interview after I did my Lost Highway book, so I was sad that he wasn't in my book, but at least we're here now. So enjoy some time with Barry Gifford.
Okay, I am here with Barry Gifford, who wrote the novel that Wild at Heart is based on. Thank you for joining us today, Barry.
My pleasure.
How did David Lynch come into Wild at Heart and become a film from your novel?
It's funny because Monty Montgomery, who was a producer, was he was a reader of mine. And he came by my studio one day and he said, "What are you working on now?" And he had a book for me to sign of an earlier novel, I think. And I said, well, I'm working on this novel, Wild at Heart, and I'm finished, but there are a couple of little chapters I want to add to it. And he was on his way up to begin filming what became Twin Peaks. It was then called Northwest Passage. And he said, "Well, can I read it?" And I knew Monty, and he was a trustworthy guy, wonderful guy, still is. And I said, "Okay, but don't show it to anybody, because I still have to add this one chapter in the beginning and so forth." So the next thing I knew, a couple of days later, I got a call from David Lynch. And David said, "Gee golly, gee whiz, Barry, I just read your novel, Wild at Heart, and all the green lights went off, and this is really fantastic, and I want to make a movie out." And I said, "Well, I gave it to Monty, who was thinking about directing a film based on it." And he said, "Well, he gave it to me, and I said to Monty, what if I like it and I want to direct it?" And Monty said, "Okay." And so that's how it all began. And then he said, "I want to make a movie of it right now. Can you write the screenplay?" And I said, "I can write the screenplay, but I can't do it right now, because I'm actually on to what became the second novel in the series, the Sailor and Lula series, Perdita Durango, which later became a film too." I said, "Why don't you go ahead, write the screenplay, and then send it to me, and I'll tell you what's wrong with it."
And what was wrong with it?
Well, that's a funny part. Anyway, I didn't necessarily tell him what's wrong with it. I told him I liked it, and I was so preoccupied. I'd finished now those last two little chapters, sent it off to the publisher, the final version. And I was, writing Perdita Durango, who's a character that comes in, played in the film by Isabella Rossellini. And she began taking over my mind, my fictive imagination. And so she deserved her own novel, which she got. In any case, that's basically what happened. And then on the first day of filming, I was on the set, and David and Nick Cage and Laura Dern and I were sitting around, and he said, "Well, Barry, how do you like the shooting script now?" And I said, "I like it fine, but you left out the most important line in the whole movie, and in the book for that matter." And he said, "What's that?"
"This whole world's wild at heart and weird on top."
And he scans through the screenplay, and he says, "By golly, Barry, you're right." And he put it back in, he reinserted it, and he was brilliant because he put it in exactly the right place. In the novel, it's sort of a thesis statement, more toward the beginning. He put it in the penultimate part, where Lula is alone and pregnant in the motel room. And she's talking to this little horse statue that she has next to the bed. And that was the perfect moment for the film, which is just one little indicator of how films are different from the books they're based upon.
Does The Wizard of Oz play a part to you in Lula and Sailor, or is that something that David Lynch totally brought himself? And how do you feel about that?
Well, he brought it in after the first draft was done. And because both he and Samuel Goldwyn Jr., who was a producer of the film, they didn't necessarily like the ending in the novel where Sailor walks away from Lula and Pace, their son Pace, not knowing that this Wild at Heart, the Sailor and Lula story, was going to go on for 8 novels. And of course, Sailor was going to rejoin Lula and all that. So David invented this because really the novel, as he said, reminded him of Elvis and Marilyn, The Wizard of Oz, all of this. It was hitting these tropes. And so he created the Wizard of Oz character. I liked it just fine.
Excuse me. When you're writing your second book, and Laura Dern and Nick Cage are attached to the first, does that change your mind's eye when you're writing books 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Do you start picturing Laura Dern and Nick Cage, or do you picture whoever you had in your mind when you were writing the first one?
It's all in my own mind. The one has nothing to do with the other. You know, movies are their own entity. Film adaptations are their own entity. I'm writing fiction. I'm writing novels. And so I just see them in my imagination. So I don't think about actors, you know, saying, oh, Gary Cooper would be great in this. Not at all. That's never entered into it.
The thing of Wild at Heart that moves me is the love story. Why do you think people are so drawn to Lula and Sailor?
In the midst of the maelstrom, which is human existence, and all the crazy shit that's going on all around them and that they have to deal with or try to ignore or run from, it's really a genuine true love story between these two people. And that's what you're responding to, thankfully. And thank you for saying that. So that's really what's central to all of this. So they're clinging to one another and they're devoted to one another. And it goes through to the end of their fictional lives.
Well, the scene in the movie that really gets me, I actually think it's the best scene, is when they pull the car over.
What's up, Peanut?
I can't take no more of this radio. I never heard so much shit in all my life. Sailor Ripley, you get me some music on that radio this instant. I made it.
Because she can't stand hearing, you know, all the violence on the radio. And the music's like really loud and they're jumping around. But then he pans down and the sunset shows and the violins come up. And now we're in this, you know, this love story like every other movie. And that's when you kind of see that we all have our own love story. That's a scene that matters so much to me. Is there a scene that sticks out for you in Wild at Heart that you really feel captures what you tried to do?
Well, of course, that scene is lifted directly from the book. It's in the novel. But then it's David's genius that creates the scene where they go from, you know, this listening to all this crazy news on the radio and you know, she can't stand it anymore. And then the pan shot that you just described so perfectly. And it's a beautiful scene. I can't really pick out one scene. There are many scenes that I like in the movie. And, David released as part of his lime green box CD set, the hour and 15 minutes of outtakes from the film that was shot, because basically the entire novel was shot chapter by chapter. So what you're seeing is a 2-hour and 9-minute version of it, but it actually goes on for another hour and 15 minutes if he were to had been able to include all the rest of it. And I advise people who really love Sailor and Lula and all to pick up that lime green box. I think it's a disc is called a mystery disc. And it's like a whole other film, that should be in Wild at Heart, but he had a contract to make a movie for 2 hours and 10 minutes, and that's what it had to be cut down to. And there's a scene in there at the very beginning, which is also the first scene in the book, where Lula is with a friend of hers, Beanie Thorne, and they're in a nightclub, and talking about her going to pick up Sailor the next day at the prison gates at PD. And I like that scene very much. So I'll go along with as a favorite scene, the one you described. And then the one, that was cut out of the movie.
The famous scene that was cut out of the movie is the Grace Zabriskie scene where she tortures Harry Dean Stanton before they kill him. Right. This scene has been lost. Supposedly there's no footage of it anywhere, of what was very, very disturbing. Do you remember the story that Dwayne Dunham, who's with us today, tells is that they tested the movie, it did horrible. They clipped out, the only thing they changed was the scene with Grace. They pulled that scene out and then the movie did great. Do you remember anything about that scene of her torturing?
Well, the scene isn't entirely edited out. A very severely edited down, shortened version of that scene. And it was pretty gruesome. And it's true what Dwayne Dunham says, that at the first test screening, really, the audience really couldn't stand it. It was too gruesome. And so it was just cut down. And I think it works quite effectively the way it is. And again, that's, a scene from the book.
So there might be some people in the audience who have never seen Wild at Heart. What would you tell them?
Go see it.
Dick Morant is dead.
Working on Lost Highway is not based on a novel. Is that correct? Like Wild at Heart? Or is it kind of based? Because I know you guys talked about a bunch of things to work together before Lost Highway came out. How did that work?
David had optioned a novel of mine called Night People. And he had it around for about a year or so. And his daughter Jennifer actually wanted to play a role in it. And but David couldn't quite figure out how to make a movie from it. And he wanted to make another film with me. Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me hadn't worked well. We had done Hotel Room from my Hotel Room trilogy of plays and for HBO, and that worked very well. We had a lot of fun doing that. And we talked about different projects. But anyway, David called me up one day and he said, listen, Barry, we're going to write another film together and we're going to make a black and white movie and I'm going to get it done, even if I have to finance it myself. And so I said, well, come on up, I'm here. So he did. And we just started tossing these ideas around. And he said, I just can't figure out how to make Night People. I said, so we're each capable of having half of an original thought. Let's try it. So that's how Lost Highway was created. David had an idea about someone receiving videotapes of their life, and they didn't know how these videotapes were accomplished or anything like this. And that was one idea. And I had a couple of ideas of my own. And so we just started putting them all together. And we spent about 2 weeks, I guess, writing it. And then I had to go to Spain actually to do work on the Perdita Durango movie at that time. And he went back to LA. And we both read over what we'd done, and we didn't like it. Neither of us liked it in particular. I remember one of the reasons that I knew it wasn't going to work in the way we'd originally written it was because it was too funny. It was really a comedy. There were some amazing comedic scenes in it. There are in Lost Highway too, but different kinds of scenes. And so what we did really was David came back up to see me in San Francisco, and we just started in on it again, but we knew the characters now. We knew who the people were. And I forget how long it took us, not very long, really. And then his assistant came up and joined us, and she typed it all up. But David and I worked very closely together. You know, we sit right across from each other and exchange ideas and, you know, write things down and longhand. And that's the way we worked. And I mean, we've always done that together. I mean, whenever we've worked together. And it's a beautiful thing. And so that's how we created Lost Highway. He liked, from the novel Night People, he especially liked two lines. One is where these two women are riding along in a car, and one says to the other, you know, we're just a couple of Apaches riding wild on the Lost Highway. And then there's another line where a character says to Sailor,
We can really out ugly them some bitches.
So he incorporated one of those two lines in the screenplay, and we just used those, and those are the only things from Night People really that exist.
So when you're making a mystery like Lost Highway, you have to hide what you're trying to do, but also leave breadcrumbs for people to understand it. And, you know, there's a line in Lost Highway where he says,
I like to remember things my own way.
and that's a very crucial line in Lost Highway. And I'm curious, when you're doing the writing, is that hard to put that line in there? Are you afraid that you're giving away too much or not giving away enough? I mean, you have to have that balance. And I'm curious if you can remember trying to ride that tight wire.
You think it's a mystery, huh?
The first time you see it, I think it's a mystery. I think I know what I believe it is, and I think a lot of it comes from Bill Pullman's line right there. I mean, that's really telling you a lot about the movie. And I know David and you don't like to give away those things, so that's why I'm curious at how that line gets in and how you hide it amongst, you know, hide that tree amongst the forest.
I remember writing that line, and it wasn't meant to be hidden. It's, you know, the fact that Fred Madison and his wife have video cameras there, but he doesn't turn the cameras on. And when the cops come in, you know, and they question him, and they say, well, why wouldn't you have the video cameras on? And then you could see who was actually ringing your doorbell. And I'm not going to say any more about that scene, except to say that he says, well, as you recited, you know, I like to remember things how I remember them, not necessarily the way they happened. I'm that way, aren't you?
I think we all are that way, but hopefully I'm a little bit of a better husband than Fred Madison is.
Do you play the saxophone?
A piano, but you had to have an idea of what Alice and Renee was going to be. But I have a feeling Patricia Arquette surprised you and brought something to those characters that you didn't expect. I find her performance to be one of the best ever. Tell me something about your feelings for Patricia Arquette's Renee and Alice.
Well, during the filming of the movie, and I was there almost every day on the set, sitting next to David. He wanted me there because certain lines needed to be added or, changed or that sort of thing. And so it was a real collaboration in that sense. But I would have lunch with Patricia some of the time, and she said to me she told me what her version of the story was. And I didn't disagree or agree. I just said, sounds plausible to me. If that's how you want to think about it, that's perfectly fine. And she was married to Nick Cage at that time. And she had said to Nick, as I believe he told me later, that she didn't understand it at first. She was looking for the meaning and for her character and all that, and she found it. She was brilliant. She was beautiful. She did a great job. It was a very difficult role, and she's a keeper, that woman. She's really terrific and continues to be. But that's really all there is to that. I mean, everybody was allowed to have their own idea of what the movie was about. Now, Robert Blake was somebody who came right out and said, I don't know what the hell this movie is about. I have no idea, what it is, but I want to do it. And he created this unforgettable character whom we called the Mystery Man. And we never named him, and we just kept him in the screenplay and in the film as known as the Mystery Man. And so whether he's an alter id or, however you might want to describe it, and I'm not giving anything away here, where does he exist, really?
Well, when I have been out doing press for my Lost Highway book, everyone asks me, is Lost Highway going to have a comeback? Is it going to, rise up the ranks like Firewalk with Me did and become, really accepted by the culture? Because at the time it was sort of just dismissed. And I can't answer that question. Can you? Where do you think Lost Highway is going to sit in the legacy of your work and Lynch's work and filmography?
Well, not only have there been books about Lost Highway, including yours, in various countries, but the movie just doesn't go away. And it's the subject of many university level film courses, just courses on Lost Highway. So it's taken hold, and it's part of the fabric, no question about it. And there was a reason why David and I made a pact not to describe the film, not to describe what the meaning of it is, or even what happens, really. And it's like when I write a novel, I expect people to be reading this piece of fiction and add something to it. bring their imagination, make their own interpretation of what's going on. You know, this is to be participants in the story, in the novel, to picture it. That's what you have to do when you're reading something, right? Now, in a film, you're watching it. All the work is done for you. All you have to do is lie back, let it come over you. It's like David and I have always had the same vision of what film is like, film in theaters, not somebody looking at a goddamn cell phone. You know, the thing is to let it wash over you. That's why his films are so beautiful. And they're like dreams. It's like when you enter the movie theater, you enter a dream. And that's what Lost Highway is like. I'm not saying it's a dream. I'm saying it's like that. And you should approach it that way. And just let the images and the language and, you know, whatever's happening there wash over you. And then you'll figure it out or not. And I think that's why so many, many, many people have said to me, they've seen Lost Highway innumerable times. Now, whether they're going there to figure it out, whether it's a mystery as you introduced it as, I don't know. It's not a mystery to me. It's not a mystery to David, and it never was.
Hotel Room is such an interesting piece in the career of David Lynch because it came out, it was on HBO. I think it had a very small VHS release, and then it sort of, just has disappeared. Why has Hotel Room never come out on a DVD or Blu-ray or streaming? I mean, do you know anything about why we struggle to see this great work?
Well, I agree with you. I think it's a great, almost lost directorial work of Lynch's. I don't have an answer for you because there have been 3 or 4 times when I've been told that it was going to come out on DVD or VHS. I don't think it was ever released on VHS. This is all contractual stuff involving HBO, involving, the video company was sold to. So it's basically been out of my hands and out of David Lynch's hands, and it's a shame. Actually, what happened, Monty Montgomery, who was one of the producers, the main producer of, along with Steve Golan and Yanni Sigvarsson of Wild at Heart, he was the producer, and came to me and he said, we're doing this TV show for HBO, and it's going to be 3 plays, basically, set in the same hotel room in different periods, different years. And I'd like you to, we'd like you to write one of the episodes. So I did, and they liked it very much. The episode called Tricks. And then they came back to me and they said, well, we need you to write a second one. And David is going to direct both of the ones that you write. And so I wrote another one, and they only gave me 2 days to write. So, these were basically 30-minute segments, right? 30-minute shows, plays. Well, I wrote it in 2 days. And when I gave it to them, I said, well, it's only 17 pages long, but the way David's going to film it, it could be 2.5 hours long. And it was, it was really great, and it went over really well. There was a 3rd episode that was directed by someone else and written by someone else, which really didn't belong in this trio. And later on, Monty, among others, said, we really should have done the 3rd play that you wrote, because I happened to write a 3rd one and published it as a book called Hotel Room Trilogy. And that book is still around. And, David, I wrote every word of it, of both of those plays, because that's what they are. They're plays. And I was there at the filming. And it's great work of David's. It's great work of the actors, Harry Dean Stanton and Freddie Jones from the Royal Shakespeare Company, and Glenn Headley. And it's just, it's wonderful, wonderful work. And in fact, it's being shown right now in Italy at the Torino Book Festival, because the book is finally coming. Hotel Room Trilogy is finally coming out there after all these years, because I think that was 1993 it showed on HBO. And the interesting thing is it showed 3 times on HBO and it won its time slot all 3 times. So it wasn't that it wasn't popular. Some places loved it and gave great reviews. I mean, Time Magazine included, and various other places. And of course, it had its detractors, the way David's films have always had its detractors, or novels of mine have always had their detractors. You have to look at it, with a sort of in a light way. You take the good with the bad, and that sort of thing. But it was very successful in that sense. The only problem, actually, in that lime green box collection of David's, of DVDs that was released a few years ago, Hotel Room, the 2 episodes that we did were supposed to be included in it. And at the last minute, they weren't. So it has to do with some contractual situation to which I'm not privy. And I don't even think David knows exactly what's happened.
That always frustrates me so much when corporations get in the way of art. You guys made this beautiful piece of art and it should be seen. And I'm glad that it's going to be seen today. I think Blackout is just phenomenal. And I can't believe you wrote that in 2 days. That is incredible. Like, was it pressure of having to do this in 2 days that lights you on fire to write something that complex and artistic in such a short amount of time, or is that just your style?
Half and half. The thing is that how I write basically is when the story comes to me. I'm all about the characters. And when the characters reveal themselves to me, then I'm ready to write, whether it's a novel, whether it's a play, whether it's a screenplay, whatever it happens to be. So really, they're buzzing around in my head like flies or whatever. And then when they're ready to speak, I write down what they're saying. And that's exactly how Blackout came to me. Yes, I, had 2 days to write it, but the characters were so clear and I knew what I wanted to do with it. And it came out just right. And David's handling of the material was elegant. And the filming of it was so beautiful. It's on YouTube. I think people told me they've seen it on YouTube. And it's been shown at various in various situations, like at the Pacific Film Archive or the Museum of the Moving Image, and you're showing it now at the Texas Theater. And it's great. They're limited screenings like this. So I don't know. Ask Dave or somebody else, why it's never been properly released. I can't answer the question.
Well, every time I've been able to interview Sabrina, I always push her on that and on the air, which, as Lynch fans, we need those to come out. I had the good fortune of interviewing Alicia Witt a couple years ago, and we talked about Blackout quite a bit. Were you aware that isn't just her first screen kiss, but that is her first kiss in her entire life with Crispin Glover, and then all the lights come on? I mean, the movie means a lot to Alicia Witt.
It means a lot to many people. And I've had many women especially tell me how moved they've been by that play, Blackout. And of course, the plays, the Hotel Room trilogy, have been staged all over the world, you know, in a dozen different countries, and in New York twice, and LA, and, you know, various, and in Dallas. They were performed in Dallas back in the mid-90s sometime. And so I've been gratified by the fact that people like the plays, and, you know, and especially Blackout. And there's a third one called Mrs. Cashfee. So the book is actually still available, I think, but it's just gone out of print and it's being reprinted next year. And, you know, I'm glad of that it's had this long life, just like Lost Highway has, or Wild at Heart has, and in different versions, whether the book versions of Wild at Heart or Hotel Room, you know, or the film versions that people only know the work from David Lynch's films, which is great. You know, one brings attention to the other. And the great thing about it all is that it's younger people now. You know, we're 3 generations removed from it practically, you know, and new generations discover the work. And that's the beauty of it.
You and Lynch have had such a collaboration. And he's even like you said, he lets you come to the set. You're right there. You guys are definitely a partnership. Tell me what that relationship means to you now that it's been so many years of working with him.
Well, one thing he did say to me is, you know, Barry, I've never allowed a writer to be on the set before you. And that was really with Lost Highway. I mean, I came in on Wild at Heart here and there, you know, but I'd watch a little bit of it and then I'd just go to the racetrack or something. And, but with Lost Highway, of course, we were collaborators. We co-wrote the screenplay. And so, you know, that I was a proprietor along with David with it. But as I had said to you before, he wanted me to be there for additional dialogue, to change things around sometimes, because, you know, a movie is a malleable thing. I mean, it changes, it morphs, it goes through, you know, different incarnations even. And so that made perfect sense to me. With the Hotel Room plays, you know, it was great. I was, you know, just there, and David filmed it exactly as they were written. And I think one little detail of the play Tricks was changed for some sort of explication. But that was totally it. And the play you're talking about and have such affection for, Blackout, was exactly as it was written. And it's great work of David's, and I hope that it can be released more publicly and become more available at some point. After all, you know, we're getting to be old guys now.
No, because I watched Hotel Room. I was one of those Nielsen ratings you were talking about way back in '93. So if you're getting older, that means I'm getting older. So we're not gonna believe in that in any way, shape, or form. The reason it needs that release is Peter Deming's work in Blackout is incredible. I mean, to film that dark, and of course he does it in Lost Highway as well. I mean, that's sort of Peter Deming's strong suit. But I'm going to ask you a question. I have a feeling you're not going to answer it, but I got to ask it anyway. But the Chinese food in Blackout, and just the reoccurrence of everything Chinese. Do you want to talk? Do you want to say a little bit about what analogy you're making there, or are we getting too close into giving away secrets?
Well, in my longest work, most of which is collected in a book called Roy's World, Chinese food and things Chinese often appear. Now, this may come from, and I'm only guessing now, when I was 11 years old, I began to work. And my first job was delivering Chinese food for this restaurant in Chicago, Cow Cow, on a bicycle. 25 cents an hour and a dime a delivery. And I guess it stuck with me. And I worked at that job for about a year. And I really got to know the Chinese family who ran the restaurant. And I guess that was a very important period of my life. In fact, David had mentioned to me at some point, he says, you know, you talk about Chinese food a lot, or and not just in the play that we're talking about, Blackout, but it appears elsewhere. And other than that, I don't know how to answer the question. But I've always liked Chinese food.
Well, I can't help but say that I think they are from the middle of America. They had never been to a big town. So to me, China seems so far away to them. It's another world. And this whole experience is otherworldly to them. And that's, why the fish speaks Chinese. She thinks the doctor speaks Chinese, because everything is because I can imagine in 1936, the idea of going to China is like going to the moon or Saturn now or something. And I think it really adds this level, but I don't know. I love Blackout so much. You can't pick favorites, but I actually think it's your best screenwriting. And I love Lost Highway, but there's something there. You're so interested in those two characters immediately. And as a writer, I love to study like how you did that, how you made us so interested in them.
Well, that's a great compliment. And, I have a recurring line that really runs throughout my work. When someone or people are described as sailing in the sea of red, and somehow that links up with this Chinese reference in my own head. They might as well be in China. This might as well be happening in China. And I'm not exactly sure why. I wasn't thinking of Red China as it used to be called, back when I was growing up. But sailing in the Sea of Red, where all of this work belongs.
When I watched Blackout this morning, I've seen it.
I didn't write that stage direct. Oh, maybe I did write it. I can't, that's the thing about collaboration. And when you collaborate as closely as David and I have, you can't really remember for the most part who wrote what, who came up with what idea, because you're bouncing these things off one another. And one thing he might say puts me in mind of something and I write it, or something I say puts him in mind of something like the kiss, and then he'll show the lights going on. And yes, they're in New York City for the first time, and that sort of thing. And I'd rather not try to analyze it. I'm not very analytical personally. I am not. I whether it's by choice or by nature, I can't tell you. But I'd rather not. The work exists by itself.
Right.
And if I were to add anything to what we already recorded, and you could cut this in if you want. To me, the truth is always in the work. That's where the truth lies. Whether it's something as seemingly complicated as Lost Highway, nevertheless, the truth is there. How you find it, if it comes to you, it's not just a suggestion. It's present.
My interpretation of Blackout, I think that Crispin Glover died years ago, and Alicia Witt is dying, and he is there as a spirit to take her to the next place.
That the characters die, not Crispin and
no. I couldn't remember their names. I can't remember what their characters' names are, but that's just my feeling that she is passing through.
Danny, his character is Danny.
And then when she sees the light, she's moving on. And this is her dying and going on to the next level. I wasn't going to say that in the thing because I want everyone to make up their own minds what they think. But it's sort of how I feel that that's what's going on. Because she says, you went away, you left me, and things like that. And
well, the key is there's almost nothing more terrible than to experience the loss of a child.
Right.
And that's what made her crazy. That's what's driven her into the sea of red. That's very clear.
Yeah.
This isn't Lost Highway. I mean, it's what's going on between these two people, and he's doing his damnedest. Danny is doing his damnedest to figure it out for himself and to help her and bring her back to a reality. It's not their love that's in question here.
No, I mean, he loves her so much, you can feel it.
Or their devotion to one another. But she's deranged by this incident, by the guilt she feels. They're making love by the water. And the child crawls into the water and drowns. How do you ever, in your present lifetime, forgive yourself, not blame yourself, not feel guilt, and not be driven crazy by it? So your interpretation is as good as anybody's, but I'm just telling you what my thoughts were in it.
Definitely. And I'm not saying that all those things didn't happen. I just feel like it could be as if she's reliving this right before she dies. I mean, I don't know. It was just something that I was picking up on.
I don't see that. I mean, to tell you the truth, I don't see that she's, going to die. I mean, I see the ending as hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the light comes on.
Right.
She's going to see the doctor, finally to see a doctor, to have, to go through some sort of analysis or therapy or, explanation, receive some sort of explanation, to find a way to deal with it. That's the key. That's it. But I really respect and thankful for your interpretation and your comment.
I never thought about it till this morning. It's just, when I was watching it, but I was just so moved by Alicia Witt. He gets such incredible performances from actors.
He was about 17 then, I think.
I know.
She'd been in Dune, David's film of Dune. I know that.
And Twin Peaks.
I remember, and Twin Peaks. I remember her mother. Her mother was on the set. She was sort of a daffy dame.
Mm-hmm.
They were in Massachusetts, I remember, and she was chaperoning. This doesn't go into the
No. We're done.
thing. I liked her. It was fun, and Alicia was fun. And originally, the characters were older as I wrote it, and it was contemporary. But they wanted to play one of the plays, to be in an earlier time period. So it was changed to the 30s. We changed it to the 30s, and the characters were younger. And I think it worked.
Oh,
it worked
yeah.
really well. But if you look at the book Hotel Room Trilogy, you're going to send me your book, right?
Yeah, it went out yesterday, so it's actually on the way to you.
Okay, well, I will find a copy of Hotel Room Trilogy.
Yeah, because I've never read the third one. I don't know about the third one.
Mrs. Cashby, and that's been performed in a lot of places. And that's sort of a dream world too. So, and it has to do with a woman and her son. The mother goes to, the boy's about 5. And the mother likes to go to fortune tellers, and she's always interested in the irreal, as I call it, not the unreal, but the irreal. And finding out what her future looks like and that sort of thing. And she brings her son. I'm not giving anything away here.
Mm-hmm.
She brings her son, and he's left alone in a room while she goes sailing in the sea of clairvoyance with the fortune teller. And while the son is alone, he receives a visit from his dead grandmother.
Mm.
And the secret is revealed.
I love that these are plays, because when I interviewed Alicia, I told her that I thought her and Crispin should tour the country performing Blackout now. Because people would go. I mean, Lynch fans would love to see the two of them recreate that on stage and then do a Q&A or whatever. She liked the idea, but I didn't know they actually were plays and that people do perform it. That's incredible.
Well, anyway, you can look it up, but the book, but I'll send you a copy. But
yeah, that'd be great.
It just recently went out of print, but as I say, it's being reprinted next year. So it'll come from Penguin Random House, But in any case, what was I just going to say to you about it? I never discussed the plays with Alicia or Crispin. In the play Tricks, since Freddie Jones, who was a great actor, wanted to talk to me about the characters. He thought, he said, this is more revealing in terms of sexuality than Beckett or Pinter, and I've played in their plays and the West End in London, and all of this sort of stuff. So I took that as a real compliment.
Yeah.
Even though Freddie was a little tipsy at the time, 10 in the morning. But the thing is, I remember it really well, and I was very gratified by that because I'd never before written a play. And
wow.
I've since gone on to write other plays, and full-length plays and opera libretti and that sort of thing. But that wasn't my métier at the time. So it was great for me to be able to do it. It was a great opportunity. And to have them directed by Lynch was terrific opportunity. And I don't think David had ever directed plays before. And so within this framework, it worked. And then HBO hated it because they thought, they wanted more Tales from the Crypt. They thought
Right.
they were get horror stories and I don't know what the hell else. And what they got, as you say, they got art with a capital R. So fuck them.
Yeah. Well, I remember being disappointed at the time, but people were just turning their back on David's work at that period of the 90s. I mean,
Well,
it just
with their ups and downs. And if you're especially true to yourself and you're, dealing with your own visions, you can't really have the expectation that people are going to love everything that you do or how you do it. Wild at Heart won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. I was there. I mean, it certainly was probably not the most popular film, but I'll tell you something. Years later, I think it was 2001, David was showing Mulholland Drive at Cannes, at the film festival. And I was there because of another film. But in any case, we came in together into the Palais and walked together down to the front. This is very moving to me. And we're standing there talking and, giving each other a hug. And the audience, which was already seated because we came in just before the film Mulholland Drive was to be shown. And my books were very popular in France. Wild at Heart was a bestseller a month before the movie even opened at Cannes, was shown at Cannes, because the book came out before the film. And so we were known. And the audience stood up, 1,500 people in the balcony and down below, and gave us a standing ovation together. That was
incredible.
1990 when it won the Palme d'Or. And this was more than a decade later. And it was a really moving, unforgettable moment.
That is beautiful. Do you have a favorite Lynch movie that you did not write?
To tell you the truth, it's hard for me to, as with the work of writers whose work I admire, going from Proust to Chekhov to whomever, it's all of a piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's a continuing story, right? My work, my writing, the Roy stories, for example, I just finished the whole cycle. It took me more than 40 years to write it, published in different incarnations and different books along the way. And I can't separate those books. So why should anybody try to separate the movies?
That's a beautiful answer. I actually really love it. My favorite author is John Irving. He really influenced me when I was in high school, and I've read his stuff ever since. And I feel the same way. He does tell a similar story in a different way, and I think writers do write the same thing.
What you have is a point of view. You have, if you're, I hesitate to say a real writer. I mean, if you're,
right,
you have a perspective, and that's your own, and that point of view, call it what you will, is the thread. It goes throughout all of the work that you produce. That's why it's in French, it's called an oeuvre. You know, it's that work. You know, Proust wrote À la recherche du temps perdu in separate books. I mean, they were published separately and this and that, but it's one work. It's the same work. So if you look at the novels and the stories of Barry Gifford, it's one work. If you look at the films of David Lynch, it's of a piece. That's how it has to be approached.
Well, that is a beautiful ending, and I thank you so much for your time and your work, and I'm glad everyone gets to see this on a big screen.
And thank you for showing.
Well, there you go. That is an hour with Barry Gifford talking about Lost Highway, Wild at Heart, and Hotel Room. I thought the hotel room stuff was amazing because that's not something that gets talked about. If you want to know more about Lost Highway, make sure you go to Tucker. I have to cough then. You see what I'm saying? And I got to do this twice. I don't want to do it twice. No one's watching at this point anyway. TuckerDSPress.com and get my book, Lost Highway. It's full color. Hey, look at that. I go right to, and mine is signed by Debbie Zoller. She signed her chapter. It doesn't come signed by Debbie Zoller. But I mean, there's full color things. I mean, who would not want this full color book? According to sales, quite a few people. So thank you so much for watching. It's our time with Scott Ryan and getting to hear with Barry Gifford, who you don't get to hear from very much. So I thought he was very open, and that makes for a great interview. Thanks, and we'll catch you next time.